Joining us now, John Adams. John is a candidate for Attorney General. He's a Republican, and he will be attempting to be the Republican nominee for Attorney General in 2017. Now, let me give you the lay of the land. We definitely expect that that'll be settled not in a primary, but a convention. We believe the primary people for 2017 do not have the votes on state central, nor should they, because a deal was made, and a deal is a deal. In my day, you shake hands with somebody, that's it, you honor it. So I think it's going to be a convention 2017, either in Richmond or Charlottesville, and there are currently, I'm going to say, three candidates running for Attorney General. Rob Bell, who got beat last time at the convention by Mark Obenchain, John Adams, who is joining us now, and Chuck Smith from Virginia Beach. If I've left anybody out, email me, because, people get into stuff and I don't always catch everything immediately. So there you have it. And let's go now to John Adams, candidate for Attorney General on the Republican side. John, good to have you with us.
Great. Always good to be with you, John.
John, I want to get first to the CNN story picked up by some of the news media the last 12 hours. Terry McAuliffe apparently being investigated by the FBI. Now, John, you're a pretty in-depth, accomplished lawyer. You got a pretty good resume. When you're being investigated by the FBI, that just isn't a good thing, right?
Well, no, that definitely is not a good thing at all. I did serve as a federal prosecutor prior to entering private practice, and no, John, it's not a good thing. My initial takeaway, just looking at it, and of course I don't have any particular insight into what's going on behind the scenes more than anyone else, is this is Hillary Clinton.
Why?
Well, it's pretty clear from the news reports that the activity that they're investigating involves overlap between Terry McAuliffe and the Clinton Global Initiative and the folks who donated both to that organization and to him. So, if you're Hillary Clinton and you're wondering what's going on in the background of the FBI investigation to the emails, and now you see what clearly from the outside appears to be a spin-off investigation into an investigation of the Clinton Global Initiative, that starts to make you worry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, I looked at what CNN had and looked at some of the allegations here, and I didn't really see anything that blew me away. I didn't get the wow, oh my goodness. I got kind of, this Chinese national who's also an American citizen donated $120,000. That's a little shady. We don't really know what went on there. The Clinton Foundation, everybody knows that. You can cast shade on that whole thing. McAuliffe's been involved in all of these kind of just touching the edge fundraising deals, whether it be selling the Lincoln bedroom or whatnot. But when I looked at that and the way it was leaked, I didn't see anything that jumped out at me that said, wow, smoking gun right here. This is bad. What am I missing?
Well, it's hard to limited information. I think what gut instinct tells you they're looking at is, was that donation really from that individual, or was it actually what we call a straw donation? Did it come from something behind him that is not allowed to make donations? So did it come from some other entity? And again, John, I go back to sort of my initial point here. It's not uncommon in large-scale federal investigations of organizations, as the investigation goes on, before you get, as you would say, to the top, other investigations spin off involving folks who are in an organization but not the leader of it. And so if I'm sitting on top of the Clinton Global Initiative and I start to see my lieutenants being and candidly, like you said, John, sometimes for things that aren't the big thing, but just an investigation, that would cause the Clintons, I think, a lot of concern.
All right, we'll see how it plays out, John. I want to thank you for that. Now let's get to yesterday, another ruling impacting Virginia, the Supreme Court ruling that the redistricting of the lower court in Virginia that changed basically the 4th and the 3rd and the 7th district. The Congressional Caucus of Virginia spent about $1.3 million on a legal effort, bunch of high-priced lawyers in order to get that overturned. That got blasted 8-0. John, come on, what a waste of money. Come on, really.
Well, look, I'm not gonna going to attack their motives for bringing the suit. What I will say, a lot of people don't realize this. If you go back to the oral argument in the case, Justice Alito actually asked the question from the bench. How can we say these members of Congress have standing if the Attorney General refused to even defend the redistricting? And so here you see what happens. It could be that it could have been a different outcome if we'd had our Attorney General doing what he's supposed to do, which is defending the legislature in its actions. So it's an interesting case in that it highlights what happens when you don't have an Attorney General in there doing their job.
Now, John, you were a federal prosecutor and a pretty accomplished one. There's another lawsuit that the Republicans have just initiated. It's for basically the people of Virginia trying to stop what they view as an unconstitutional act by Governor McAuliffe in order to reinstate over 200,000 felons' voting rights. Can you explain that suit, what it means, and what you think of it?
Sure. Well, let me just say at the outset, one of the things that does please me about the lawsuit is who they hired. They hired a great lawyer, probably one of the best constitutional lawyers in the country, Chuck Cooper, who's a friend of mine, and Chuck is a great lawyer. They've made several arguments that the governor exceeded his authority under essentially the clemency powers of the Constitution. I think the better argument actually is that by taking this sweeping action, right, what the governor did was actually usurp the authority of the legislature, because the whole concept of clemency and of restoration of these rights is that you do it on an individualized basis. Mm-hmm. And if you don't do it on an individualized basis, you're not really granting clemency, you're changing the law. And that's an important distinction, because what this comes down to, John, is separation of powers. And with McAuliffe's action, the way he handled this, it wasn't really a grant of, I'm going to restore rights on an individualized basis, which he clearly has the right to do, was I'm going to rewrite the law of Virginia, because the law of Virginia says felons don't have a right to vote. And so with, the flick of a wrist, I'm going to change that law. And let me highlight one thing for your listeners, John, because I think this is really important. One of the things I found most telling about this whole process is the statement that Governor McAuliffe issued with the order. And he said, I think it was the first line, it goes something like this: with this order, I restore the voting rights of over 200,000 of our fellow citizens who work, raise their families, and pay taxes. And I thought that was a pretty interesting comment by the governor as he issued this order. I will tell you this, John. You show me someone who has committed a felony, paid back all their restitution, they now work, and they're raising their families and paying taxes, I'll sign the order reinstating their rights to vote. The problem, of course, is the governor said that in his order, but he had no idea if these 206,000 felons were actually working, actively raising their families, or paying taxes. And so I think the commentary that he issued with his order shows even he knew he was supposed to do an individualized review, because his order sort of intimates that he actually did.
So basically, he could have accomplished the same thing, but he would have had to sign 206 individual orders, and there would have been some kind of a review in reinstating each of these. I mean, if he hired a staff, I guess they could review them all, and he could just sit up one day and sign 200,000 of them, right?
Yeah, and John, here's the beauty of that, though. If he did that, then we as citizens could hold him accountable for what he'd done. So, for example, take an example of a former felon who is way behind on child support payments and has been threatening their former spouse. If you do an individualized review and he signs a single document that says, I'm going to restore these rights, we as citizens can say, look at it and say, what are you doing? This is a terrible decision. But when he does a blanket restoration, even he throws his hands up afterwards and basically says, he doesn't know anything about the people who he's done this for. And,
you're right.
And the other thing, John, is we speak in terms of restoration of voting rights. That's how this is all phrased.
Right.
But look, other things at issue here. Sitting on criminal juries. That comes back.
Right.
This is the first step towards getting your ability to possess a firearm back. There's a lot of things that go along with a restoration of civil rights beyond just the voting rights. And it requires, look, John, we talk about why I'm in the race. We expect our elected officials to be responsible with the powers that we, the people who provide the consent of the governed, the powers we give them, we expect people to be responsible with that power, and that's where McAuliffe failed the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Let's get to this race, John. I fully expect that this is going to be settled at a convention, not a primary. I don't think state central members can go back on their word and create more division with an already fractured RPV. That's just my narrative. I think they made a deal. In order for this thing ever to heal, they have to stick with it, and I'm certainly going to fight to make sure they do that, regardless of what I think. I think a deal's a deal. John, Republicans in Virginia have lost 7 statewide races in a row. One candidate running, Rob Bell, and I'm just going to be frank because that's what my show is, candor. Rob Bell lost to the guy that lost to Mark Herring. Now he's running a second time. Many people see him as the favorite. I think Republicans have to analyze this and say, like, if you don't like Mark Herring, who can win in November? That's the case that you're making. Why are you a better candidate in November than Rob Bell?
Sure. Well, let me just say, I think you hit on one piece of it directly. Look, we have to win, and Mark Obenshain is a great guy. Mark and Rob had a spirited fight last time. Rob came out second, lost to Mark Obenshain. Mark Obenshain went out. I mean, gosh, how great would the Commonwealth be if he were the Attorney General? Unfortunately, and there's a million reasons we can all point to, he lost to Mark Herring. In some ways, Mark and Rob are similar. They have similar voting records. They have similar backgrounds. The Democrats are going to run the same play in November they ran against Mark Obenshain. Here's the thing, John. We got to change the equation, right? And I come at this from a very different background and a very different perspective. And so let me tell you what I've learned traveling the Commonwealth. We've been out on the campaign trail for about 115, 120 days. Everyone still cares about the issues they care about. But people in the Commonwealth have seen a deterioration of our very form of self-government to the point where it's even more than issues. They want the rule of law back. They want order. So the question in November of 2017 is going to be, do we want to continue this with Mark Herring, career politician, using our Attorney General's office to advance his political goals? Or do we want to change and have a constitutional lawyer, someone who understands the rule of law, someone who will work hard to make sure the will of the people is defended and that the Commonwealth is defended against overreach out of Washington? And I think, basically, if you look at my background, you'll see that I have the ability and the experience to do it. And, you know, a lot of people said, John, you've never run for office before. There were a lot of doubters in the beginning, and we're working our tails off to get all over the Commonwealth and get to meet people so they can get to know me, and we're making an incredible amount of progress, John. So I think what's going to happen is when we come into that convention in 2017, people are going to have a choice, and that choice is going to be, how do we win our Commonwealth back? And one of the first things we have to do is we got to get control of the Attorney General's office, who is best positioned to do that. And with my background experience, I think people are going to say we want John Adams.
Well, look, here's my thing. If you go down the same path, you end up in the same place. I think a lot of us, John, are tired of losing, and I think you got to make changes. And I look forward to a spirited race. I'm not sure if Senator Stanley might jump in. If he does, you know, more the merrier. But I look forward to a spirited race, and I would urge all of my listeners to keep an open mind to all of these candidates, because you're going to have to find somebody that's going to fight for Virginia as Attorney General, but you're also going to have to get somebody who can win, because if you can't win, it's all for moot. And I've already been down that path enough times where I'm done with that. John, I want to thank you for your time today. People want more information. Where do they go?
Sure. I'd love your listeners to do this. Go to johnadams4virginia.com. It's FORVA, johnadams4virginia.com. Sign up for updates. We send out updates on the Supreme Court, on what's going on all across the Commonwealth. And then you can link right from there to our Facebook page and like us so you can follow us. And John, it's always a pleasure to be on with you and your listeners, and I hope you have a great day.